Welcome back. Today in the Woodgrafter I'm going to sort some storage out for my ever-growing Benchdog collection. That sounds good? Stick around. Hey and welcome back. If you're anything like me, your Benchdogs seem to breed and you accumulate more and more and more of those very valuable and very useful accessories for your MFT table. If you're also like me, you tend to chuck them in a drawer or in my case a wooden box, and what tends to happen over time is they bang together. You can't find the ones you need when you need them, and in the middle of the workflow I find that quite distracting. So what I decided to do was to sort that out and build some storage out of these scrap pieces of oak that I had knocking about. As always, the plans are available and they're part of the YouTube bundle, so go over to my website www.thewoodgrafter.com and you can get hold of the plans. Now, I designed both these racks for my specific use, and obviously you can modify the designs for your needs. This end of my rack I've got my quad dog collection, and I can quickly get hold of these dogs, use the ones I want, pop them back in again and I know where they are. Here I've got a set of bench top protectors. Again, I can do these, I can make the quick cuts that I need and drop them back in. Over here I've got a couple of these quick clamps. They just simply slot into the bench, tighten them up, and then I can secure the material, ideal for sanding type activities. And on the back here I've got a couple of these 9mm extensions for the rail system. Now, my second rack, I have 4 of these tracksaw dogs. Now, these have got the B collars on as well, so they're already preset to the common sizes I use, so I can grab the one I want, bang it in, put the rail on, and off I go. A couple of the supports that go towards the back for the rail dogs as well. I've got 2 long dogs and then 2 shorter dogs inside here, 2 sets. And then I've got these roller dogs, and I find these fantastic for dropping into the holes, putting some of the big materials on top of that, and then I can easily move those around when I'm doing finishing type products or final tuning of the product. A couple of these flat dogs over here, which are great to use with these 9mm rails, and then a B-stop underneath here that just gives me some clamping opportunities, something to push against when I'm doing things like dominoing. Now, all of the range that you see here I built up over time from benchdogs.co.uk. I've reviewed some of these products, not all of these products, but if you are interested in these, pop on over to benchdogs.co.uk, have a look at the range here, see what they're used for, and if you think they're useful, use the code TheWoodgrafter at checkout and you'll get yourself 5% discount, so why not? But this episode is not about the content, it's about these frames themselves. So let's go and look how we built these now, and then we'll come back together and see them in the final position. Here's my pile of scrap oak. So the first job is I want to work out what I'm going to use at my scrap pile and bring it down to size. So looking at my plans, as always on page 1 I have this sort of kind of overview, this isometric view, and you can see it's made up of 5 key parts. It's got a top rail, a bottom rail, 2 end rails and a centre point for support. We'll start by looking at the top one and the bottom one. We'll get these cut down to size, we'll get them cut down to the right thickness, etc. And then we'll cut the 20mm holes on these and put that sliding dovetail joint in the middle. So from my scrap I need to find a top piece that's going to be 657 long, 65 wide and 10mm thick. And for the bottom piece, again 657 long, this time 40mm on the depth and 10mm thick. These two look good to me. There's this scrap piece I just used to test finishes when I was building the coffee table, and this was a scrap piece that I milled down just for fun really, also during the coffee table, so I think these are going to be okay. I go through my normal milling process. First of all, I resaw the stock because after all I want to maximise the yield from these scrap pieces of oak. Once I've done that, I'm over to the planer jointer and I bring these down to the 10mm thickness. Now at that point I can start to cut these to length over on the Capex, so nothing new and exciting in this process. Now this is a bit new. That grey thing that you can see there is actually a template that I printed out on my 3D printer. It's got 4 30mm holes inside it, and I've got a 30mm bush inside the festool router. The holes are actually 31mm, slightly oversized, and then I've got a 20mm bit inside the router, so that allows me to simply come through and make the holes. Everything lines up, everything's nice, and that slight waggle you saw was taking that 31mm into account, which makes the 20mm holes oversized. I then use a 30mm standard Benchdog, 30mm at the top, 20mm into the hole, and that positions it, and I work along the stock, giving me all the cutouts that I need. And now you can see the final results. All the stock's nicely done there, all the holes laid out, and I'm ready for the next stage of the project. With all these holes cut, everything cut down to length, and I'm just turning my attention to this little dovetail, this sliding dovetail joint. All I've done here is I brought all the stock together because we know it's all the right height and we know it's all the same length. This is quite an easy job to do. What I've used here is a 9mm thick fence extension that comes with a Benchdog.co.uk Mark II fence system. That's 9mm, this is 10mm, it works perfectly. And just a couple of flat dogs here just to push against. That allows me to line all this stock up beautifully. I've got a couple of quad dogs, one here and one here, that just allow me to put pressure in that direction. So this is all now squared up to the table. I put a sacrificial piece of wood here, so as I go through I don't blow out the back end of that piece of stock. And here I've just got a couple of clamps putting pressure against those bench dogs. I've come in with a festool rail, put that into position, and I've just made sure that's clamped to those dogs here. So this is now square to the table, this is square to the table, that means that's going to give me a perfect line. So I'm just using the router attachment to put my router onto the rail, and I've got everything centered up, and with the bit inside I'm ready to make the cut. I've set it for a 5mm plunge cut, which is half the thickness of the stock, and that's what I've specified in the diagram. The only difference is I'm actually using a 9mm router bit, not the 10mm one I've shown here, and that's because I've not got a 10, but 9 it was near enough for the job. So let's get this cut. And there you go, so we've now got that beautiful sliding dovetail perfectly lined up. So when I bring these pieces together, line up the ends, it's going to make a perfect joint. And look at that, it doesn't get much better than that. So with all the joinery done on all of these, the next job is I want to have a look at these end pieces here, parts 2 and part 3. Cool, so we can actually get these pieces out of here. They need to be 65 wide, which is the same as that, and given that these were offcuts off these pieces, they're perfect, they're absolutely perfect. Now we can see that these have got dados cut into them, so obviously take this stock here, but you can also see it's got a bit of a cutout here and a round over. So I think it's going to be easier if we go ahead and just take out these dados first of all, and then cut these to final shape. Now it just so happens in my Whiteside kit I do actually have a 10mm router bit, and these are 10mm as we know, and looking at that it does look like it would make quite a nice fit, not too tight but a nice fit. So we'll take some scrap stock first of all, and we'll just make a test cut and see whether it's a good fit for these or not. And if it is, happy days, we're in good shape. So I've dropped the 10mm bit in place, and I've set a distance of the fence to the back of the bit of 10mm, which is our first cut. There you go, and that's a fit I'm looking for. Nice. Coming together quite well, I think. Nice tight joint. We've got to do this middle one, obviously, for a little bit of strength, because you can see there's quite a lot of flex in that wood that I don't want. So then I want to profile these end pieces. I'm just going to come up here, across here, and then through there like so, and then a nice arch on this end. The reason I'm profiling mine out is I want it to come onto this little rail here, so it's going to hang over this power rail, and that's why mine's being notched out. If you're not doing that, then just make this bottom one the same size as the top one, and then you can just hang it directly onto the wall. But I just want it to make use of that power rail and just to use that space up really. But yeah, looking pretty fine. I think what I'm now going to do is actually go through and profile these. I think we'll get that cut off now at the bandsaw. So the first thing we'll do is to cut this notch out. Obviously this piece goes to the front, so choose your front edge, line that up with the front there, and I'm going to notch this out there. Then this one is obviously going to be the mirror image of it, so now this will be my front edge, and I'm going to take that front edge to there, something like that. And there you go, and now you can see what we end up with. So when this piece sits inside, you can see that's going to be nice and flush with that. While I'm here, I just want to go ahead and just clean up a few things. Just run a very, very sharp chisel very gently just down that edge, just to get any debris off, and then just come into this corner and make sure it's nice and clean. I'm just using one of these French curves that I printed out, and I think something like that will be rather pleasant. And I'm also thinking I can probably batch these out. So I'm just going to rough this out here with the bandsaw, and then we'll come back in and we'll just sand this profile using the bobbin sander. That should look quite good. So I just want to give all these parts a light sanding now before I glue them together, and then we'll glue the frame together. When it's dry, we can come back in and do the sliding dovetail that locks it in the middle. Okay, so we can glue these together now. Obviously make sure that you've got the right ends. Make sure that that dovetail is going to line up for you. That's it. So there are the ends I need to get together. I'm going to put the bottom frame in first. And when you're happy with that, some very light clamping pressure to close the joints. And I mean very light. If you put too much pressure on this, these are obviously going to bow in the middle. Just tell that to you see that middle part deform, and then stop. Cool. Wipe the excess off. Look at those joints. Look how nice they are. Nice and tight. Okay, so we'll let all those dry off overnight. Then tomorrow we'll do that central sliding dovetail. Happy days, see you in a minute. So there now also the clamps, and it's looking pretty good. I've sanded these down again, just a hand sanding, just to take away any of those glue marks and just bring it down to something that looks rather elegant. So my next job is looking at these centerpieces. Now initially I was going to use these offcuts of wood that came from this, but when I look at these, they've got snipe on. These are the end of the board, and I can see the snipe coming down. So this end here is actually narrower than this end here. So obviously if I were to use those, I'm going to get a joint that's too tight or a gap, or have to do some pretty clever measuring up. And similarly, this piece is the same with snipe down this point here. So we're not going to use that. But I also have this piece, this longer piece, which is 40mm wide, same as this, and 10mm thick, which is what we want. So we're going to come ahead and we're going to use this. So what I now need to say is, what size do these need to be? Now obviously the length of this is dictated by the project that we're building, and rather than taking measurements here, because don't forget we've got flex in both these, so there's no guarantee that these aren't bowed in the middle in some way, shape or form, I take the measurement from this end piece, and that way the centre is guaranteed to be the same distance as the end piece, and that will hold everything nice and parallel. So the measurements I want is from here to here, plus the depth of that dovetail, plus the depth of this dovetail. Oh, about 55.5. I just measured at both ends. 55.5. So we've got 55.5 plus 4.56, we'll call that 4.5 plus 4.79, so let's call that one 4.8. So my actual length needs to be 55.5 plus 4.5 plus 4.8, which equals 64.8. So I'll just use the Capex to cut a couple of pieces of wood out, 64.8 long, and then we'll look at how we're going to size up these dovetails. Good. Now the next thing I want to do is to look at this. We know the material's 10mm wide, so I actually need to measure this distance here between this part of the dovetail to this part of the dovetail. That's the first thing I need to know. 8mm. 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 So we know we've got a piece of stock that's 10mm wide. We've got a dovetail on the end of this that we know is about 4.8mm deep, and we know that this top part here is 8mm. So the gap from there to that side must be 1mm, and similarly the gap from there to that side must be 1mm as well, because 8 plus 1 plus 1 is 10. So we go to the router table and we set first of all this depth to try and get something that's going to fit nicely in that slot, and just for now we'll give it a 1mm cut. So I've set the bit height for about 5mm, just under 5mm, about that 4.8, and I've set the fence back from this outside cutting edge by a millimetre. Just using a bit of support here to help me out, and I've clamped the piece of wood into position so it's nice and square to the fence and it's flush on the table. So I should now in theory be able to take a very light pass here. So there's a dovetail that we've just made. Obviously it looks a bit fat just from eyeballing it, but it's a nice shape. And I'm just eyeballing it now to see what the fit would be like. I'm looking at the height first of all. And actually, the height is pretty good. I think we'll probably get away with that for the height. It's obviously too fat, and I'm going to say it's too fat by a millimetre. So I'm going to move this fence back by 0.5 mm using the increment system, and we'll try again. And there you have it. Pretty quick and pretty lucky there. That's a beautiful fit. So I'm now going to come in with the actual work pieces. Now these are so small I can't actually clamp them in, so I'm going to have to be very, very careful and hold these and go across very gently indeed. There you go, that's not bad at all, is it? Not bad. So they're looking pretty good now, so the final job is nothing more than a couple of coats of, you guessed it, Osmo. So there you go, final position for the Benchdog holders. That's come out really, really well. I'm pleased with that project. Hope you found this useful, and I'll see you next time on the Woodgrafter.